Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this IAB MENA Masterclass. I'm Olia, and I'm the IAB MENA Operations Director. It's great to have you all here today. Before we get started, I'd like to do a quick introduction for those of you who are joining us for the first time. Our IAB MENA Masterclasses are all about learning from each other, sharing insights, and exploring a wide range of topics that really matter to our industry. These sessions are designed as a forum for our members to exchange knowledge that benefits the entire MENA region. We'd like to thank all of our members who have stepped forward to present these sessions so far, generously sharing their knowledge and insights for the benefits of the wider industry, and doing so purely out of the goodness of their heart. And just so you know, what you won't find in these sessions, including today's, is any sales talks or promotional materials. We keep it all focused on learning and sharing insights. It's an opportunity to step back and think about the big topics that are shaping our industry. Just a quick reminder, and as mentioned when you register, these sessions are recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel. So feel free to revisit them or share them with your colleagues who couldn't make it today. Before we start, a quick look at our lineup for next month. November will be all about search. So first, on November 13, Amnika will share insights on how to maximize Google search tools. And then on the 27th, will take us through what the future of search looks like, especially with the advancements in AI and visual search. Now, back to today's. I'm pleased to introduce the team from Tailwind and Integral Ad Science, who will spend the next 45 minutes sharing their thoughts about attention, specifically what it is, how it's measured, how can it be leveraged, and how it can benefit your campaigns. Tailwind EMEA has been an IAB member since 2021. They are the marketing and retail technology company of the Think Digital Group, operating in MENA since 2018 with their local offices in Dubai. We're happy to have them with us on this session, along with their regional partner from Integral Ad Science, a company specializing in media quality measurement and optimization for this insightful masterclass on media quality and attention metrics. With us today is Wajahat Osmani, Commercial Head of Tailwind in MENA, along with Joe Bell, Vice President of Business Development of Integral Ad Science. With that, I'll hand it over to Wajahat, so wish you a great session.
Thank you, Olivia, for that brief introduction, and appreciate you hosting this session for us, and very happy to be contributing to the industry in whatever little way we can. So as we've just been told, my name is Wajahat, and I'm the commercial head at Tailwind. Just for a quick introduction, we are an ad tech and martech consultancy and integrator, and we partner with global ad tech solutions and provide local brands, agencies based out of the Middle East access to those technologies, as well as any support that they need in order to utilize them. We operate in Middle East and Central Eastern Europe, so that's the length and breadth of our operations. But essentially, what we have today is a session dedicated to IAS, and we are graciously joined today by Joe Bell, the VP of Business Development at IAS. And we're going to be talking the most, let's say, talked about item in our industry, which is the attention measurement and attention tracking, and the IAS take on what attention for IAS means, what do we do with it, how do we measure it. So Joe, over to you. And of course, at any point in time, feel free to use the chat function to ask any questions. We will have something like 10 minutes towards the end of the session to address any questions. But as we progress, if there are any questions, please use the chat function to ask them, and I'll relay that to Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Wajahat. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for giving up some of your time this afternoon to come and run this to have this session with us. As Wajah had said, like really pleased to be here. Really pleased to be working with the IAB, and yeah, let's get into it. So I've been a part of the programmatic ecosystem now for maybe 12, 13 years, and with IAS for the last five. And yeah, I've been thinking about topics of obviously the broader programmatic ecosystem, how digital is changing, and increasingly media quality, and now really the topic of attention. Um, I want to start off by giving attention relevance within the broader discussion about media waste or efficiency. Then we'll talk a little bit about context itself in video and how that relates to attention, before getting into a deeper dive on attention and specifically our partnership with Lumen, the eye tracking attention kind of specialists. So when we're talking about media quality or efficiency, we're talking about some really big numbers, right? So, fraud alone is estimated to be a $50 billion problem, which is a little under the GDP of Slovenia. And this continues to grow, right? As we're seeing a bigger slice of overall ad budgets move into the digital space, so that nominal number in terms of waste is going up. But fortunately, as is our ability to try and understand and minimize that number. So, and this is something that IAS and our industry is really focused on, is how do we find the right metrics, bring the right data to media buyers in order to give them transparency into what they're buying and help them improve overall performance by understanding where there is waste and where it can be kind of removed. And that's like at a very simple level what we do, and I think is important to consider as we move into this topic of attention. So when we're talking about efficiency in media, what we're really talking about is the four broad pillars, and these are pretty similar across all of our part of the industry. It's not just IS, but we think about really what are the pillars that allow you to influence a consumer as they go through a buying journey. And those are, an ad's viewability, an ad's potential fraud rate, the context or brand safety in which that ad is being delivered, and its geography. And I've put in a couple of bullets here around those those pillars and how they are specific to MENA. And you can see based on a report that we produce biannually in the UAE, something like 33%. I think it's 32.9, but I rounded it up. It's not just a third. Are of ads are being delivered in display that are never viewable. So this is not a new problem, but it's something that we are constantly trying to stay on top of when we're trying to think about how we ensure that our overall media campaigns are being as efficient as they really can. And when we have these four pillars being supported, that's what we consider to be a kind of quality impression, as just being a measure of efficient media. And for an opportunity to be considered quality, then we're saying it is viewed in the right territory, in the right context to a human being. And as I said, those are the four big check boxes when we consider the kind of basics that are required in order to drive any kind of buying behavior. Okay, so consider that a kind of baseline for where we want to start. I want to pause or kind of transition a little bit into video, because I think video and attention are really important partners to one another. And I say that because when we talk to large brands, we know that those large brands want to be buying highly impactful ad units in a lot of cases. And very often that means expensive, high quality video environments. And that often correlates with high attention. But critically, that's also got to be within the right context, because the last thing you need is an expensive, high impact video ad running next to a social issue or violence that are totally unacceptable for your brand. So I guess this is the first but not the last time you're going to hear me talk about how attention then is going to be part of an overall toolkit for buyers, and understanding attention as part of that toolkit alongside things like context, I think are really, really important. And this is where IAS has spent a lot of time and investment over the last couple of years, is to really give buyers better tools when it comes to understanding third-party measurement of video, especially within user-generated content environments where there's not that same publisher or journalistic limitations that that the kind of videos that you might be showing up next to. So as I said, we think this is really, really important because we see context as being critical to the overall media buy, and also how that is going to interact with attention. And I want to just sort of like narrow in on this, because you can see how, as this kind of video plays, you can see how we're pulling out different objects within the video itself. But it's not just good enough to be able to say, oh, this is a car, right? We need to be able to say that this is a car accident. This is the coming together of two vehicles. And being able to get to that level of granularity is something that I think is really, really important when we're talking about video, and ultimately, therefore, really important when we're talking about attention. Similarly, when we think about when you see this short Mr. Beast video here, right? This is kind of what I think really brings it to life, is that if you're running kind of even basic ML or AI tools against video classification, it would be really easy to put this into a bucket of perhaps violence, right? We can see what's going on. Maybe you take that one level further and you might say, oh no, this is sport, because perhaps you've captured the boxing glove. But it takes a pretty sophisticated model to be able to say, yeah, I can take both of those two things into account, but then also understand the fact that this is like Mr. Beast is in this video and Jake Paul's in this video, and both of those two persons are associated with entertainment. So actually what we can do is we can classify this as entertainment, and we can put it into a much kind of safer overall context than we would have if we were just kind of applying a basic logic and saying this was violence. So I think this is really important when we're thinking about media efficiency, because yes, we need to make sure we're removing waste, but we need to be able to do that in a way that doesn't create a huge amount of false positives. We need to make sure that buyers are able to buy safely, but also buy at scale. And that's why these kind of ideas of context, effectiveness, and efficiency all really sort of tie that together. So when I talk about efficiency of media, I think I try and lean into these ideas of viewability, fraud, context as being somewhat intuitive. If you're buying low quality media, it's unlikely that you're delivering the kind of impact on a user journey that you really intend. And I think what I absolutely love about this graph here, I can put my hand up and say I'm a huge nerd, like when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I love this slide because I think it gives you the empirical evidence that aligns to that intuition. So what you're looking at here is hundreds of millions of impressions run over several months last year, where we connected post-bid performance data from directly from our clients' DSP data to the actual individual impressions that IAS is measuring. So really connecting that full value chain together and being able to see, okay, how does media quality or media efficiency really align at the impression level with the end performance of that given campaign? And what we see is this really nice tight correlation between efficiency and ROI, which, like, intuitively this makes sense, right? Like, if I'm buying less rubbish, I should get better performance. I should be able to influence buyers more. But what I love about this is that, this is that really laid bare in a very kind of numbers driven empirical way, just to give you the kind of the data behind that intuition. Okay, so let's kind of move then deeper into attention. You know, as I said, attention is not a metric on its own, but it's a metric within a collection of relevant metrics all around efficiency. And I think whilst we're still in the early days of this conversation, we are seeing that same correlation between key KPIs and efficiency. And I personally believe that attention is becoming one of those KPIs. Really, I think the attention metric is moving into a gap that is being created by increasing signal loss via the loss of good cookie data, and also increasing volumes going into social media environments, both of which make it difficult for buyers to make cross-platform attribution decisions. And I think that has buyers looking for new and better metrics to optimize mid and upper funnel campaigns. And I think really that's where attention is moving into, and at least today is providing kind of the most value. But there are other areas specifically around, you know, cross-platform creative analysis that we're starting to see it be effectively utilized as well. But in my mind, it's really about moving into that space or fulfilling that need, which is closely tied to cookie deprecation. So IAS, when we talk about attention, we're talking about, or we think about three buckets of metrics that influence the overall number. The first of which is visibility. So not just a binary viewable, but like how long was it in view? What are the potential quartiles involved? Situation. So how does the ad density of a given page compare? What's the ad's share of screen? And obviously relate to that, like the device or format of that ad. And then thirdly, interaction. So how are human beings interacting with that ad unit? And we can pick up some of that through scroll, we can pick up that through click, we can pick up that through you know, pause, skip, all of those kind of metrics that we're getting from different ad units. And, you know, as I said, we bucket that into interaction. And this is where we include the Lumen data as well. So we actually at IAS, we were kind of a little bit slow when it came to coming up with a decision around attention, or coming up with a kind of a product positioning around attention. And that was kind of deliberate. It was based not only on our own intentions around the product, let's say, or our own thoughts around what attention might be, but also around the feedback we were getting from our big advertisers and our big clients. So specifically, we got some feedback from Coca-Cola, who basically said, you know, I don't want viewability 2.0, right? Like if attention is something, and attention is something that is meaningful, you need to show me that it's different. And I really don't care about like a new package of existing viewability metrics. And, you know, I think that's important, because if we're going to bring something new to the market, we want it to be differentiated. We want it to be providing a new and solving a new problem. But also because, you know, big sophisticated buyers like Coca-Cola, like they're already pulling in lots of granularity around viewability, around conversion data, click data. You know, they're pulling in that data already at a pretty granular level and being able to make their own decisions. So, you know, they want to make sure that if we're bringing something new, it's genuinely new and it's not just kind of a repackage. So this is the kind of overall model that IAS looks at. And as I said, based on that feedback that we got from Coca-Cola and also from our own internal views, we decided to work with Lumen. We ran an RFP to look at the other many of the other attention providers, you know, Adelaide and others, and you know, we landed on Lumen. We're pretty pleased with the partnership so far. We really like that team, and you know, actually, we hope to be out in the Middle East with them at the early next year. But as I say, they're kind of part of the overall picture, but they're neither exclusively how we think about attention, but nor is the attention score produced directly without them. So one of the questions I've had quite a bit when I'm talking about attention and when I'm out in the Middle East or having conversations like this is, okay, but how does this really correlate to, or how does this work with non-Latin languages? Especially the question is often languages that don't read left to right. Like surely humans look at ads and look at web pages differently depending on the language in which the context of the language in which they're in. And I think that's a really, really good question. But I also think it's born out of a slightly, I think it's born out of kind of cookie seed data conversations. So what I mean by that is that anybody on this call or in the audience who has thought about or bought on audience buys knows that there's this dynamic trade-off between specificity and scale, meaning that you might have 50,000 cookies or hashed emails or something for auto intenders, to use a kind of classic example. And you know that as you scale that model, so you dilute that overall pool of users. And you know that if you try and scale an audience from 50,000 to 500,000 IDs, that every incremental ID you add has less and less relevance to the original pool of users. And I think that that way of thinking has kind of impacted how people are thinking about attention models. And there is a concern, I think, that as we scale attention models, that we will have that same kind of devil's trade-off. I guess I'm here to say that based on what we're seeing, that trade-off does not operate in the same way. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is that the Lumen models are large enough to incorporate enough variations of publishers and languages. But secondly, that we're ingesting the Lumen model and IAS is ingesting these metrics from our sort of publisher network, in essentially real time, right? So as we see a new ad unit that we're able to score for attention, so we are looking at those data points afresh every time and applying our model on top of that. So it means that we don't get that same trade-off in terms of scaling and dilution, because really we're applying that score every single time we see a new web page. It's not as though we're relying on old web pages to inform new ones, so much as us being able to look at what we know drives attention from our existing model, and then reusing those scores coming out of those publishers on a net new basis to then be able to score every new ad against that model. And I think that's like quite a subtle difference, but from what we're seeing, at least, it really shows that the scalability of these models across a real wide variety of different format types, device types, and languages is valid. So this article here that I'm flashing up from Dentsu is one of the case studies that's been looked at. There are others. I'm aware of OMG doing one. Havas, I believe, has also done one. So there is more and more data set to back up that idea that we are able to scale these models into new markets without that same understanding of dilution. So before I sort of pivot into some real world impact, I wanted to show you a couple of slides that Lumen present, because I kind of think it helps us give this context within the wider narrative. So you can see, I think, here with this heat map, what Lumen eye tracking is doing. It's really helping us understand how the inputs like ad size, position, time in view, kind of the metrics we've already discussed, it's helping us understand how those inputs actually change human responsiveness. So the heat map really is the kind of the human reflection of those inputs. It's helping us understand, okay, well, like ad size obviously has an impact on how long a human is like dwelling on a particular area of the screen, but it's not the only thing, right? Things like position, size, format, etc. also come into that. And I think this slide helps me think about the difference between those two, where one is a collection of inputs and the other is a reflection of how those inputs show up when they're put through like the human eyeball, right? One is an input and one really is an output, and that helps us having a much deeper understanding of how users are really spending time with content. Yeah, I think it's a really kind of nice way of bringing that together. And you remember at the beginning I said, well, I think this is helping us understand efficiency better, helping us understand a kind of mid-funnel metrics better. And this is kind of the slide I wanted to come back to, because what you can see here is that in this Dentsu study was that ad recall has this really tight association with attention. And again, I think when we're thinking about signal loss, and we're thinking about trying to find good metrics that help us inform mid and upper funnel campaign performance and help us find ways of optimizing those campaigns mid-campaign, this is where we can see attention coming into that overall mix of tools that are part of an overall understanding of efficiency. And yeah, to my mind, this is the area that attention can really help buyers most, is by becoming a proxy for more expensive or difficult to measure metrics, like brand lift. I'm sure people have been involved with or been close to brand lift studies, and they're great, and they're a really important way of understanding how campaigns can be improved, or campaigns are making a difference to overall buying behavior. But they're difficult to run. Like they need a lot of volume. They need a really good methodology. It's generally quite a substantial period of time. They're not the kind of things that you can run as always on against every campaign. And I think if we can find a metric, and my hope is that attention is this metric, if we can find a metric that has a really strong correlation between itself and overall brand lift, then I think we have something that is allowing us to make efficient decisions mid-flight in order to optimize towards an overall otherwise more difficult to find data set like brand lift. And this is certainly what IAS is seeing. So there's a couple of studies we've got. The first one here being run with Upwave, and what we can see really is that same kind of association, which is when we are seeing impressions with higher intention scores, so we are seeing the same or similar uplifts in those mid and upper funnel metrics or KPIs that buyers are looking for. In this case being awareness or purchase intent. And we have another example of this here, which we ran with Nissan in Italy. And again, looking at that same thing, which is that if we can think of attention as being part of an overall efficiency play, then being able to drive towards better attention is producing an overall higher efficiency of that overall media buy. In this case, increasing conversion rates and lower overall costs per conversion. So finally, I just want to return to my initial point, which is that I think attention is not a metric really that sits on its own. I think if we're optimizing exclusively towards attention, we'll end up with, probably quite aggressive advertising, and probably a lot of it being served to fraud, right? But I think if we think of it as part of an overall package of tools that allow us to better optimize media efficiency, then I think that's where it's going to drive better outcomes for buyers. So if this is something that you guys want to go into a little bit more detail on, then there's some QR codes here that link to more detail and other studies that we've done. As I said at the top, I think this is an evolving conversation. I think we'll see more and more come out around this over the next 12, 18 months. my hope is that many of you on this call will take this opportunity to find ways of testing attention against different verticals in different markets with different KPIs. And IAS is certainly invested in trying to make that easier for your buyers. But yeah, I think we're still early on in this journey, but based on certainly what I'm seeing and kind of where I think this is fitting into the overall ecosystem, yeah, my hope is that this is kind of a useful metric for bigger buyers going forwards. Anyway, with that, I'll bring it to a close and see if we can answer any questions.
Thank you, Joe, for that insightful presentation. And while we wait, I have one. I mean, I've got a few actually now that we have you with us. I think attention is something which I think over the course of the next few quarters, I don't know what the timeline is, but it's going to get more defined, I suppose, until it comes to a point where it gets standardized. And up until then, I think one of the shift that needs to happen is understanding how this compares to their existing metrics so that they can use the attention score to add on top of whatever they're currently measuring, right? How does it sort of add value to them in what they already do? So as part of that, I think one of the pressing question is, how is this different from viewability? You've rightly mentioned viewability 2.0. So is it a viewability 2.0, or do you see that as something different?
Yeah, no, I think it really is different, and I think it's different because it's I've talked a lot about like being a package of tools, right? I think viewability is quite narrowly defined, like the more you think about it. And I think the kind of basic MRC definitions around viewability are pretty narrow and also liable to gaming or being gamed by nefarious sellers of inventory. So I think a couple of things. I think one, attention is a broader way and perhaps a more accurate way of looking at the intention of viewability, right? The intention of viewability, I think, was always something like attention, right? It was trying to give us a sense of what are people really looking at, right? And what we've landed on was something quite narrow. Now, I think what's nice about attention is like not only are we incorporating a number of different ways of thinking about viewability, i.e., not just binary, was it viewed or not, time in view, etc., but we're also including things like the share of page, interaction, and that kind of thing. So not only I think is it a more complete way of looking at the similar underlying problem, but what we've seen is that with the inclusion of the eye tracking, what we're able to get is a much better reflection of how humans truly respond to a page. I think the viewability 2.0 accusation against attention is really valid if you don't have that piece of it, because that piece is what turns this from being just a set of inputs, just a set of data inputs, to an output that is really driven by human behavior. And that is, I think, where this differentiates. But also, I think it's kind of a smarter way of trying to solve this similar underlying question. So, yeah, I definitely think there's a difference between those two things, and yeah, I think it's a bit evolution and a bit revolution in both senses, shall we say? But yeah, thanks for asking. It's a good question.
Thanks, Joe. I don't see any other questions, so maybe I'll go with another one, especially around the eye tracking capabilities, right? So that's an important subject as well, to be able to factor in eye tracking. So one of the things that you've mentioned is the use of lumen and selecting lumen. So it'll be helpful, I guess, for everyone to understand why lumen versus there are other eye tracking players out there as well. So what is it with lumen that you found that is going to be much more useful for the use case? And as a subset of that, what I want to know is what kind of data, I mean, how is the data given to you by Lumen? Is it a score that is presented to you, or do you rely on any other data points to give a specific attention score, let's just say?
Yeah, great question. So why Lumen kind of boiled down to two things for us. One is we ran an RFP and we looked at a lot of different attention players out there. You know, I mentioned Adelaide, but there's others. And we wanted to we wanted to get a sense of what the market looks like. You know, IAS, much like many people on this call probably, is still trying, you know, at least certainly a year ago, was still trying to figure out, okay, what is attention? Is it something meaningful? Is it something differentiated? And we looked around and we spoke to our clients and we spoke to the kind of players in the industry. And what I guess what we really liked about Lumen is that you know, they had a very clear definition of what they thought attention was about early doors. And they also, and that was really resonating with our buyers. So when we went and spoke to our advertisers, this is a name that like kept coming back to us. And then when we ran the RFP and we looked at the kind of data points and the kind of model that we'd be able to use and work with, you know, it made sense, I think, as something that we could both ingest, was incremental, and also we could help provide scale to. And that scale question relates to the second part of your question, which is how does IS ensure that we're adding value on top of the Lumen data? And the way I explain it is that, you know, Lumen doesn't provide IIS with a kind of database of you know, key value pairs. It's not like publisher A equals attention score 5. What they provide to us is an underlying model that allows us to take their scoring methodology and apply it to net new web pages. And I think that's what's great, is that we're able to use their thinking and the research they've done over that Lumen have been around for a really long time, right? Lumen have not just suddenly popped up now that we're talking about attention. They've been around for like a decade, thinking and working on these topics, working with research to understand how human beings look at web pages. This is actually relatively mature tech in many ways. It's just newer to the media environment. So when we looked at what they were doing, we wanted to be able to find a way of saying, okay, cool, what you've done here is really interesting, but we need to make sure we can actually scale it. And I think that's where the relationship is really important, is being able to take what they're doing and the science behind what they're doing, but be able to leverage that and scale that into the volumes that the IS is looking at. You know, IS has also been around a long time. Like we're on, you know, trillions of impressions every month, and you know, giving us that kind of scale is really important for us. So yeah, slightly long-winded answer, but really it was about a couple of things: is understanding who's in the market, what our clients care about, and also how that data can be effectively leveraged.
Thank you, Joe. I guess maybe we'll have a time for one more question, because you mentioned scale, right? And that's a pressing question. It's the unsaid question by a lot of planners, is that will this affect my scale? So for example, if I start factoring attention and then restrict media based on the attention score, would that mean that I'll have less of a reach versus what I do right now? Or what does the experience say? Is it a valid concern, or is it the opposite?
Yeah, so I think reach is always a valid concern, and I think that is, it's one of the things I talk about quite a lot when I'm talking with agencies and buyers, is how do you make sure that the tools that companies like ourselves, but not just us, are bringing to you are being used in a way that allows you to maintain or even grow your reach. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk a little bit about context as well, is because I think it's really important that we're moving away from, you know, things like very restrictive keyword lists, or like restrictive URL targeting lists, or, you know, there's a lot of really blunt instruments out there that can really limit reach. And I think what we're trying to do is bring maybe a more sophisticated way, or a more proactive way of thinking about avoidance, or targeting, but overall context, like what is the media I want to be next to, essentially. And then making sure that those decisions are at as granular level as possible, right? Like, do I want to be on this web page? Maybe, but I don't want to be on that page, or like, this website. I definitely don't want to be on that page, but maybe I'm okay being on that page, right? And if you can make granular decisions at the content level or at the page level, then I think that means you can start increasing your overall reach, whilst maintaining the same standards of what we might call brand safety, but context, like the same contextual standards that you care about. So okay, so how does that influence into attention? Absolutely right. Like attention, if you just start applying some kind of pre-bid filter and only look at super high attention, you are going to limit your overall reach. And there is definitely going to be a marginal trade-off, at which point constantly trying to increase your attention is going to lead to like negative outcomes. So again, and I know this is kind of a frustrating answer, but this is why I think it's part of an overall package. Like we want to be able to look at, okay, what's the overall quality or efficiency of the media I'm looking at? And then if I was a buyer, I would then start saying, right, I want to measure my attention. I want to measure attention across these different campaigns, across different partners and across different platforms. And then I'm going to use that information to start optimizing. But I wouldn't come straight out the gate and say, just, okay, let's slap down a 60 points or higher attention pre-bid filter. Because I think, again, that would be kind of maybe like an oversimplification of how this can work, but I think it's part of being able to think about media efficiency more broadly, and that's kind of how IS is thinking about this. Is we're going to provide you with the tools for measurement. You can sit down and you see how this compares between different channels, and then you can make some decisions. And as that starts to make more sense for your brand, and maybe you want to run some like uplift studies yourself around attention versus that vertical you're working in, so you can then start translating that into more optimization tools. And that is the journey I think we're going to be going on over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I mean, that's a very detailed answer, so appreciate that. I think it's one of the pressing concerns which is going to come up time and again, both internally for team members as well, to explain to their clients essentially on why this versus something else. But it does help to first evaluate, establish a base, your own client benchmark or an internal vertical benchmark, let's just say, and then move towards improving or optimizing and getting a better score. So I think that's a very good strategy. I believe no more questions from the audience, and I don't have any other questions as well. So in that case, appreciate everyone joining. And thank you, Joe, for helping us run this session. I'll pass the conversation to Olivia, our gracious host for today.
Yes, thank you everyone for making the time to attend today's session. It was, and also a big thank you to the teams from Tailwind and IAS for sharing their expertise with us. So we hope to see you all at our upcoming sessions. Thank you again.